Yo, pay attention because this just took a wild turn. On a recent episode of the Joe Rogan Experience, Joe Rogan started connecting dots that nobody expected to go public this fast. And right in the middle of it, Melania Trump suddenly denied any link to Jeffrey Epstein without even being asked. That alone raised eyebrows. But here's where it gets unsettling. Just days later, a quiet document tied to the Federal Bureau of Investigation surfaced, claiming Epstein allegedly introduced her to Donald Trump. Now the internet is locked on one question. Why speak first if nobody accused you? Because sometimes when pressure builds behind the scenes, the truth doesn't wait. It slips out early. And when timelines stop lining up, even the smallest details start to feel dangerous. What looked like a simple denial is now being re-examined as something much bigger, especially after Joe Rogan put the spotlight on it.
Lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today.
Before we go any further, let's set one thing straight. This is not another reckless internet pile-on. Right now, online, there are countless claims being thrown around about Melania Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, some exaggerated, some completely fabricated, and some with no evidence at all. That's not what we're doing here. What matters in this story is what can actually be traced, verified, and documented. The photographs that exist, the emails that were sent, the files released by the FBI, the court records that can't simply be dismissed. And the truth is, once you start lining those pieces up, the picture that forms is already unsettling enough without adding anything extra. Because here's what makes this moment so unusual. Up until April 2026, mainstream conversations were not seriously linking Melania's name to Epstein in any meaningful way. That changed instantly the moment she stepped forward, on her own, without prompting, and addressed it publicly. That single move shifted everything. So now the real question becomes, what pushed her to do it? In this video, we're going to break down what led to that unexpected White House statement on April 9th, and what was happening just beneath the surface in the days leading up to it. You'll hear about a Brazilian model who boarded Epstein's plane as a teenager, the warnings she later posted online, and the sudden silence that followed. You'll see the FBI record that doesn't line up with Melania's version of how she met Donald Trump. You'll learn about an author who was threatened with $1 billion lawsuit and chose to fight back instead. And by the end of this, you'll be left with questions that still don't have clear answers. So let's go back to where this all begins. We're not going to spend time re-explaining Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. Most people already know who they are. Instead, we need to focus on a name that doesn't get nearly enough attention, but sits at the center of this entire network, Paolo Zampalli. This is someone you need to understand. Zampalli, originally from Italy, built his career in New York during the 1990s as a modeling agent and founder of ID Models. He's the one who says he discovered Melania at a casting in Milan, arranged her move to the United States, handled her visa, and personally introduced her to Donald Trump at a party he hosted in 1998. But his name doesn't just appear in that story. It shows up repeatedly in Department of Justice files connected to Epstein. According to FBI records, Zampalli was at one point attempting to purchase a major modeling agency alongside Epstein. That agency? Elite Models, the same company that represented Ivanka Trump when she was just 15 years old. And today, in 2026, Zampalli holds a powerful role as a special envoy for global partnerships under Donald Trump. Now think about the timing. April 9th, 2026. By all accounts, it was supposed to be a routine day inside the White House. No major announcements. No scheduled briefings. Nothing out of the ordinary. And then, without warning, Melania Trump walks into the grand foyer and begins speaking about Epstein. There was no build-up, no official notice, no preview of what she was about to say. Even reporters were caught off guard. ABC News correspondent Karen Travers pointed out live on air that Melania's office had given no indication this statement was coming. There was no preparation, no context, just a sudden appearance, and a message that immediately raised more questions than it answered.
Questions, Elizabeth. This was not something that the First Lady's office had teed up or previewed in any way before she was giving those remarks, just saying that she was coming out today at the White House to make an announcement.
Even Donald Trump later admitted he had no idea it was coming. Let that settle in for a moment. The sitting president was completely unaware that his own wife was about to step in front of cameras and address one of the most controversial figures in recent history. That's not routine. That's not coordinated. That's something else entirely. And when she spoke, Melania Trump didn't hesitate. She made a series of firm, unmistakable statements. She insisted she was never a victim of Jeffrey Epstein. She rejected the idea that Epstein had anything to do with how she met Donald Trump, maintaining that their first encounter happened at a New York party back in 1998. She said she had no awareness of the abuse tied to Epstein's network. No involvement, no connection. She also stated clearly that she was never on his aircraft and never set foot on his private island. Every point delivered directly, leaving no room for ambiguity, but somehow raising even more questions than it answered.
Not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. I met my husband by chance at a New York City party in 1998. I have never had any knowledge of Epstein abuse of his victims. I was never involved in any capacity. I was not a participant, was never on Epstein's plane, and never visited his private island.
And then she called on Congress to hold public hearings for Epstein survivors.
On Congress to provide the women who have been victimized by Epstein with a public hearing specifically centered around the survivor.
The reaction from the survivor community was immediate, and it wasn't supportive. A survivor identified as Marina Lerda spoke out publicly, questioning the impact of what had just been said. In essence, she pushed back on the idea of asking survivors to relive their trauma in front of Congress, asking why the burden was being placed back on those who had already endured so much. Not long after, a group of 15 survivors connected to the Jeffrey Epstein case released a joint statement. They described the speech by Melania Trump as a deflection, arguing that it redirected attention away from deeper issues and onto the survivors themselves. To them, it felt less like support and more like shifting responsibility onto those still dealing with the consequences.
Re-traumatize us and ask us to go in front of Congress and tell them our story, which we've had told some of them already, and then do absolutely nothing. That sounds like a shitty idea. You're just trying to shift attention from something to something else.
So, the question everybody asked was the same. Why now? What specifically triggered this? Nobody asked her to make this statement. It wasn't in response to a news story that just dropped. It wasn't part of any press cycle. She just did it. And the timing matters a lot because of what happened the day before. The model who threatened to blow it all up. The day before Melania's statement on April 8, 2026, a Brazilian model named Amanda Angaro posted a series of messages on X, and they were not subtle. She wrote, "I will tear down your corrupt system. Maybe you should be afraid of what I know, of who you are, and who your husband is." She also wrote, "Something was clearly wrong, but I am not part of any evil mission involving children. So what did you do, Melania? You tried to involve me, but you failed because I have character." She claimed she had known Melania for 26 years. And then right after Melania made her White House statement the next day, the posts disappeared, deleted. Now, to be clear, none of this has been officially confirmed. What we're pointing out is the sequence of events. A woman with documented proximity to the Jeffrey Epstein network posted direct, unsettling messages aimed at Melania Trump just one day before that sudden White House statement, and then those posts disappeared. No explanation. No follow-up. Just gone. Interpret that however you choose. But once you start asking who this woman is, the story begins to shift. Because her identity isn't random. It connects threads that were never meant to be seen together. So who exactly is Amanda Angaro, and why does her past raise so many questions? Amanda Angaro is a Brazilian model, now in her early 40s. But the part that stands out happened decades earlier. In 2002, when she was still a teenager, around 16 or 17, she boarded Epstein's private jet, widely known as the Lolita Express. The flight went from Paris to New York. Years later, in March 2026, she described that experience in an interview with the Brazilian newspaper O Globo. According to her account, the plane wasn't filled with industry professionals or adults. It was filled with extremely young girls. She claimed there were dozens on board, many appearing to be between 14 and 16 years old. A detail that on its own raises serious and uncomfortable questions.
Cheguei no avião, tinha mais ou menos quase 30 meninas no avião. Aí eu achei uma coisa muito estranha. As meninas eram mais parecidas com meninas estudantes.
On that same flight, she came face to face with Ghislaine Maxwell, now serving a 20-year sentence for trafficking. Amanda was still a teenager when that introduction happened. At the time, her modeling career was being managed by Jean-Luc Brunel, widely described as a key recruiter within Epstein's orbit, a man who never fully answered for the role he allegedly played. And this is where the story begins to tighten. Because Amanda Angaro wasn't just loosely connected to that world, she was personally tied to Paolo Zampalli for nearly 2 decades. The same Zampalli who brought Melania Trump to America. The same Zampalli linked in records to Epstein. The same Zampalli who now holds a position within Donald Trump's circle. So what became of Amanda? In June 2025, she was detained and later deported. According to her account, Zampali leveraged his influence during an ongoing custody dispute to have her held by immigration authorities. She spent roughly 3 months in detention. Think about the pattern for a second. A young model who once flew on Epstein's jet, who met Maxwell, who was represented by Epstein's recruiter, and who later shared a long-term relationship with the man tied to Melania's early career, suddenly removed from a country. And just before she began posting messages suggesting she would reveal something about Melania, she was already under pressure. Then she posts. Then the posts vanish. And the very next day, Melania steps out at the White House with an unannounced statement. Coincidence or something else? Now, let's separate noise from fact because online speculation has gone in every direction. First claim, that Melania was an escort who met Trump through Epstein's network. This has been legally challenged and dismissed. The Daily Mail published that allegation in 2016 and Melania sued. The outlet retracted the story, issued a public apology, and paid approximately $2.9 million in damages. There's no verified evidence supporting that claim. Second claim, that Melania met Trump at a party hosted by Maxwell. This one continues to circulate, but remains unproven. No documents, no confirmed records. What is confirmed is that in February 2000, photographs show Donald Trump, Melania, Epstein, and Maxwell together at Mar-a-Lago. Third claim, that Melania had any involvement in Epstein's trafficking operation. This is not supported by any victim testimony or court documentation. It remains a conspiracy theory without evidence. Now here's what is actually documented. On February 12, 2000, there is a Getty Images photograph placing all four, Trump, Melania, Epstein, and Maxwell, at the same event. Melania herself has acknowledged that her first known encounter with Epstein occurred around that time, which aligns with the record. There's also a confirmed email exchange. In October 2002, Melania reached out to Maxwell in a friendly message, complimenting her and suggesting they reconnect when back in New York. Maxwell responded warmly, addressing her with a nickname. A small interaction on the surface, but in the broader timeline, it becomes another piece of a much larger puzzle.
Epstein files, where Ghislaine Maxwell calls Melania Trump Sweet Pea, and Melania calls her Miss G. But y'all believe her when she gets up there and says they barely knew each other?
Now you might be thinking, that's just a polite email, nothing more. Maybe, but timing changes everything. That message was sent in October 2002, the very same year Amanda Angro, still a teenager, says she was on Jeffrey Epstein's jet alongside dozens of underage girls, where she also encountered Ghislaine Maxwell. And Maxwell wasn't just moving in elite circles, she was later convicted for trafficking minors during that same period. When you widen the lens, the connections begin to stack up. Jean-Luc Brunel, identified as Epstein's recruiter, managed Amanda. That path leads directly to Paolo Zampali, linked to both Epstein and Melania's early career, and connected to Elite Models, a company Epstein reportedly tried to acquire. At a certain point, it stops looking like coincidence. It starts to look like a tightly woven network, one that overlaps with individuals now positioned close to Donald Trump. And then comes the document that shifts the entire narrative. This isn't rumor. This isn't speculation. This is an official record. Shortly after Melania's public denial, a 2019 FBI witness interview surfaced within the Epstein file releases. The witness, a Polish woman who worked within Epstein's environment in the mid-2000s, stated clearly that Epstein himself introduced Melania Trump to Donald Trump. That same document outlines Zampali's attempt to acquire Elite Models with Epstein and notes that Epstein was physically present at the agency during model castings. The same agency that represented Ivanka Trump as a teenager. Now step back and look at the contradiction. 3 different accounts. Melania says it happened by chance at a 1998 party. Zampali claims he personally made the introduction. The FBI witness says it was Epstein. 3 versions of the same moment, and they don't align. Only one can be accurate. Zampali has even stated publicly that he's willing to testify before Congress about how it happened. But that raises another question. If the story is simple and harmless, why does it need testimony at all? And why would an independent witness provide a completely different version? And why does the same FBI file place Zampali in active business dealings with Epstein during that time? Then there's another layer. Author Michael Wolff, known for his book Fire and Fury, began suggesting links between Melania and Epstein during interviews. The response was immediate and aggressive, a legal threat reportedly reaching $1 billion. Not a correction, not a clarification, $1 billion warning.
This $1 billion threat. I have long-standing relationships with First Amendment lawyers because I'm a writer, and I called my lawyers. I said, what do we do here? And they were rightly appalled. I mean, you have the First Lady of the United States using the power of the presidency to basically intimidate someone who is saying things that she or the president does not want to say.
But here's where it takes another turn. Michael Wolff didn't retreat. He moved first. Instead of waiting for the threat to become a full lawsuit, he filed under what's known as anti-SLAPP law, a legal safeguard designed to shut down cases that are meant to intimidate or silence rather than address actual wrongdoing. It exists for one reason, to protect speech from being buried under the weight of power and money. In other words, if someone tries to use their influence to suppress a narrative, this law pushes back. And in this situation, Wolff made it clear he wasn't going to be pressured into staying quiet.
Instead of waiting for her to sue me, which we turned around and sued her under the SLAPP laws in the state of...
ND Wolff claims he has many hours of recorded interviews with Jeffrey Epstein himself. Hours of it on tape. He launched a GoFundMe campaign to fund his legal fight against the First Lady of the United States. More than 25,000 people donated. He raised $800,000. 25,000 strangers gave money so one author could fight the First Lady in court over Epstein.
Of October, and that has now been and then I launched a GoFundMe campaign which raised an enormous amount of money. From more than 25,000 individual donors, we raised more than $800,000, which certainly sent a message to the First Lady. It means that we can continue this legal action against her for quite a long...
And here's the part that keeps pulling this story back into the spotlight. In interviews, Michael Wolff pointed to a pattern he says can't be ignored. Every time Melania Trump pushes back legally against claims tying her to Jeffrey Epstein, the attention doesn't fade, it intensifies. The very actions meant to shut the conversation down end up amplifying it. What was once a whisper turns into a headline. What was dismissed as speculation suddenly demands a second look. And now, with conflicting timelines, resurfaced documents, and voices refusing to stay silent, the situation feels less like a closed chapter and more like something still unfolding. Because the real issue isn't just what has already been said, it's what might still be waiting to come out. Too many overlaps. Too many contradictions. Too many unanswered questions sitting in plain sight. When key details don't align, people start digging deeper. And when they dig, they don't stop at the surface. So now the pressure builds, the curiosity grows, and the story refuses to disappear. So ask yourself this, was that sudden statement an attempt to get ahead of something bigger? Or was it the moment everything began to unravel? Drop your thoughts below. Every perspective matters, and this is one story that clearly isn't over yet.